think that one of the things that helped me get over stage fright as a performer was this level of scrutiny in my practicing, right? Once I had that moment sitting on stage with an orchestra behind me where I was like, what is that chord? I never did that again, never. And I had a great teacher when I was a kid who taught me all of these things and I completely ignored her.
No one ever taught me that.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
Yeah, somebody taught me to do this stuff and I didn't do it. But the nice thing was when I was a sophomore, and I didn't need to. I mean, I memorized it easily and just did it. But when I needed it, it was like, oh, this works, right? And it really did help. It calms the nerves because it's like, okay, something might not go right, but I know this so well that I'm going to be able to recover, right? And that gives you a lot of confidence when you're in front of people, right? So I think a lot of people think once it's memorized, we're done. And I get this from even my college students, that I've memorized the piece, now I'm just going to play it, right? And that's not the way it works. That actually students need continued guidance on how to take it to the next level, right? It's never done because we're always calming that in there. So we need to guide students on how to not make the memories stronger. We're going to guide them on how to have more security and greater confidence. Memory should actually be a daily ritual. It's part of something we do every day. Right? If you just challenge yourself, if you were to take a piece and say, even just a Clementi Sonatina, and say, I'm going to learn this page of this piece today and I'm going to memorize it tomorrow. Right? And then think about what you did. And then what happens to most of us is, I can sit there for 30 minutes and I've got it memorized. And I put it away and I come back the next day and what happens? It's gone. That alone should tell you why this is a daily process. And then what happens is, okay, so now I relearn it, and I put it away, and I come back the next day, and it's gone again. Right? I'm older now, so it's gone again the next day. Right? And the older you get, the more days it takes for it to stick. When I was 18, it was 2, and now it's probably about 7. Right? But the whole point is that we have to review it daily. That repetition and reinforcement makes it stronger. And eventually the day comes when I can just sit down and play. Right? And it's no different for our students. They think that because they memorized it for you this week, that I am done memorizing it. Right? And what they need to do is review it on a daily basis. Right? And understanding how memory works is very helpful in developing a process like that. So I will often give students memory challenges that deliberately isolate different components of the memory. Right? So I'm going to say to you, I'm going to have them play, this week I'm going to give them a performance tempo that's half tempo. And we've already talked about that. That eliminates muscle memory. Right? So if they can play it at a half the tempo, looking at the keyboard, I know that they can play it. They're not only relying on muscles. So that's a deliberate strategy to trick them. Right? I will have them play silently on top of the keys. You ever done that? So they sit there and they play, and they're touching the right keys, but they're not making any sound. What is that going to do?
It's the ear.
We're developing the ear, right? And my inner sense of hearing. How well do I know what it should sound like? Right? So it's a deliberate attempt. I'm also, to an extent, developing the visual aspect of what it looks like. Right? Because if I'm moving my fingers to the right keys but not getting the benefit of the sound, I am only seeing patterns without using any ear. Right? So it does both. It can develop the inner hearing and it can develop our ability to look, I'm not on that slide yet, but hey, to look at the keyboard. I will have students block passages and talk harmonically. Right? I already mentioned that one, that they can play the left hand blocked and that they can name the chords as they're going. I will have them identify sequences. A really fun game to do with like a Bach prelude is, okay, here's a sequence that goes down a step for 3. Can you extend it by 3 more? Right? Because then I know that they understood the sequence and the pattern of notes. Right? So extending a sequence, duplicating a progression in another key. All these are little games you can play with the student that will get them going. I already mentioned playing the left hand alone. Right? That it helps your oral understanding and it makes the left hand something that they can know and they can look at. Right? Because otherwise students will forget what's in the left hand and not be able to dig themselves out. There's other types of practice tricks that you can do with students, and a lot of these are things that we do all the time, right? But I think a lot of us do some of these activities without knowing why we do them, right? The students in my class were teaching Chopin etudes to each other last week, right? And one of them came up and was going through rhythms and articulations and stuff, and all things that we do as pianists. Doing some practice techniques that I've seen multiple times. But the question that I ask is, why are you doing that? What are you hoping to accomplish by taking your student through that series of events? And we have to think, right? I think we do a lot of things as teachers, and we ask our students to do a lot of things without actually explaining why, right? And unless we know why we're doing it, it's not a good focus and it's not going to help our student. So we hear blocking. I say blocking like 100 times every class period. Why do we block court? I've already mentioned categorizing the information. Do you know that our hands work better when they find groups of notes, that it acts on muscle memory? And our eyes work better, and it will categorize information more readily if I take those 4 notes and play them as a group. It's more efficient, and my hand will actually go to a shape. So if I'm playing Alberti bass and I've taught my student to do these kinds of patterns, it will help the student's memory because the hand will find the whole shape. So the blocking isn't just about identifying the chords, it's actually helping the memory and the strength of the muscle. Yeah?
I always think about, I use blocking a lot.
Good.
And it's like a word, you know, when you're first
Right.
learning to read,
Right.
P-H-E. Okay, and so I
True.
think it's a word, and so you're learning these words. That's
Right. You're exactly right. And if they don't know their letters, they can't spell the word.
Right.
Right? It's the exact same thing. Varying passages. How many of you teach students to change articulations and rhythms? Everybody know what I'm talking? So they take this, my favorite, my little sonatina here, and they take that same passage, maybe play. And I have them play staccato, and then maybe I have them do the. Or maybe. And then reverse it. Right? But there's all these little tricks that we do. Why do we do that? Because my teacher told me to. What are we accomplishing by that?
I think it helps your muscle memory, honestly.
It absolutely is linked to muscle memory. I always tell my students our hand. These fingers are all different sizes and strengths. Part of what we're getting out of that is we're evening out that technique and helping to get the weight behind every single finger. It can help your memory. If I can play that passage by memory with all those different articulations, you think I know it? Right? It can make your memory stronger by going through passage work in that way. It evens out the hand. It helps us have smaller goals along the way. I had a teacher tell me that doing that long, short, that dee, da, 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 can actually help you build speed and velocity because you're going very quickly between just 2 notes at a time. Right? So by swinging it, dee, da, da, I've built a lot of speed between those 2 fingers. Grouping can do the same thing that I can do. I can play faster when I have that moment of pause, right? So all those articulations and rhythms that we learn can actually help memory and security and performance. It's ingraining that into our hand and making the muscle memory even stronger. So it's a great way to practice to help performance. I often will tell students, I mentioned this section, to build speed gradually. Like we talked a lot about slow practice, but we want to get it fast. So I like directed practice with the metronome. I will tell a student this week you're going to start this piece at 80, and I want you to play it once at 80, once at 88, once at 96, and maybe you make it to 104, and then you crash and burn. And then I'll say to the student, where do you start the next day? And they say, 104? I say, no, you're going to start back at 80. Right? Because when we perform, what happens in front of people? Thank you. We change our tempo. Right? I had one of my boys start a piece so slow once. I was like, what are you doing? But thankfully he could do it because he practiced it at 15 different tempi. But when you have a student that has only practiced a piece at one tempo, when they choose the wrong one in performance, it can be a disaster. Right? So by making them practice with a metronome, it has to be with the metronome because otherwise they don't maintain a tempo. Right? So with the metronome at 10 different tempi, they're more prepared. And I actually always have them overshoot. Right? So if our goal is to perform this at 96, I want you to be able to play it at 116. Right? So that way when they're nervous and they play at 116, it's something they've done before. Right? And they're not shocked. And they sometimes can have some success. So it's all these things that make them more secure. And these are things you can do very specifically with them. I mentioned the groupings. Those really work well with extended passages. That if they can stop along the way, it gives them little goals. If you're looking at a 8-measure passage in a Mozart sonata, that if they have goals along the way where they can stop, it helps to organize it. It will make the memory stronger. And it also makes it feel like we don't have to keep starting over. Whenever they go back, what happens?
The beginning's great.
But they get to the same spot and they fall apart because they just had a bad experience with it. So anything you can do that helps them to go forward is going to make them a better performer, right? I mentioned the ghost playing previously. That works with hands separate, hands together. Anything they can do. I had a teacher once teach me to just play the left hand on the piano, the right hand on my leg, sing the right hand, play the left hand, in a fugue, singing one voice, playing another voice. All these things are tricks that can help a student to be more confident with what they're doing. Right? And I think the last aspect of this is that students have to practice performing. Right? We often tell students, you know, don't stop. When you get up on stage, keep going. Right? No matter what, keep going. Right? But have we taught them to do that? Right? That's a different mentality. Because I just spent all this time saying we're going to play it right. We're going to play it right. We're going to drill things. But they actually have to get the experience of saying, hey, I'm going to perform this piece now. Right? And that may just be in their practice room, in their living room, whatever it is, that right now I'm going to give a performance. And that they understand this is different than the practicing. It's a different way of practicing. And I like to say this is your reward. Right, so you just worked on this piece, you reinforced the memory, you blocked things, you played slow, you did starting spots, you put the metronome on. Now, reward yourself and you're going to do it. And when they do this, what they learn is how to deal with unexpected problems. You can't expect a student to get up on stage and know how to overcome the finger slip, the memory slip, whatever happens, if they've never done that before. Right? So you say to them, go at the end of your practice session, perform this for your cat, or your dog, or your brother, right? And that means you're going to practice not stopping. No matter what happens, you're going to move forward, you're going to go ahead, and you're going to pretend that whatever happened was what you meant to do, right? So that they will learn how to deal with the unexpected, and they have to learn that. Yeah, go ahead.
I love that when I'm rehearsing them on the grand piano and they make a mistake, and the first thing they do is they look at you.
Yes.
And I look at them and I go, I'm sorry, you're on your own.
Yeah.
That look of shock in their eyes,
Right.
You're not going to help me? Nope.
Right, because I'm not going to be able to help you when you're up there. All right, yeah, go ahead.
You know, I just had something, I wanted to mention that the use of technology has been a great thing. A student of mine just happened to play at an event last Saturday. And she said she played the best she'd ever played. And I said, and she's not done practice, but she's good. But she's not a great thorough learner, as you say. And I said, well, how did that happen? Did you just get lucky, or did you practice, or what happened? How'd you do it? She said, I got my nerves out by calling my friend and doing a Facebook performance, a FaceTime performance. And so I just wanted to mention that, the kids are so hooked into technology that they can contact grandma in another state and Skype with them and play their pieces for them. They might think it's more fun.
It is more
than
fun.
Plan for their.
It's a great idea, and even just recording yourself.
That's the best.
Like I do that with my kids all the time. I'm like, okay, whenever we're gonna have a performance, I'm gonna make a recording of it, right? And we're trying to get a good one we can send to Granny, right? And just that pressure, because you're mimicking the pressure of performance. So it's a great strategy, and you're right. Technology, that's something they really relate to.
Yeah, and they enjoy. She did it, and I thought, well, perfect.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important thing. So I'm telling you, in this setting, they can start it at home. And the recordings work, all those kinds of things work. Even just telling your student, I want you to come back with a clean recording.
Yeah, good.
Right? Because now I've gotten them that's consistent, that they're not punching in and fixing along the way, because now they're striving for that performance, and there's pressure. Right? That's why they forget in front of you, but not at home. As soon as even just the teacher's there's pressure. Right? So I start them at home, maybe then it's lessons. Like I'll even say in a lesson, okay, I want you to perform this for me. Right? That means we're not going to stop and fix this. Right? So whatever happens, I want to start your lesson today with a performance of this piece. Okay? And that they understand the difference between performance and a run-through. And then once they get good at that, studio classes, in-house repertoire classes, and ultimately things like recitals, competitions, and festivals. Ideally, a kid is not getting up, right, at getting up on stage for a competition who's never had a successful performance of the piece in front of their teacher, in front of their friends, in front of other or more friendly audience, right? It's really not fair to the student if that's where they start. But the result of this kind of thing is that students will kind of learn to recover from errors and play with continuity. It's a learned skill. It doesn't just happen. Right? I think when I first made mistakes in performance, it was like, right? And eventually, you learn to just kind of make stuff up. Right? It's a learned skill. Some of the best performers that I watch at the conservatory are the students who know how to improvise. Right? And they will forget, and they'll make something up, and I know they made it up, right? But a lot of people watching had no idea that they've learned to play with that kind of continuity, that we're going to keep going, that the world doesn't come to a crashing halt just because something didn't go as planned. And that's a learned skill, right? They also learn to accept that errors will occur, right? They will occur, right? We all make mistakes. If you get that perfect performance, bravo, but it doesn't happen very often, right? When I play with my husband, it's really actually kind of funny, because he's over there playing vibraphone or snare drum, where we're playing like one note at a time, right? And I'm over there playing 15, 20, and he'll walk off stage and be, man, I missed 2 notes. I'm going, I missed 2 notes in the first measure. You know, it's just, he can count how many notes he missed in an entire concert, and I can't even keep track of how many I missed in the first beat, right? Because we're doing so much. And so the more you can accept that the errors are going to occur, that doesn't mean I'm not trying to play the right notes. I really am. Things happen. But it also gives them insight into how prepared they are. Right? Nothing kind of tells you as much as that crashing and burning moment of standing in front of your peers and all of a sudden not knowing what came next. That, okay, wait a minute. Maybe Miss Melody was right, and I need to go through and block the left hand. And I forgot the left hand today, so I think maybe she knew what she was talking about. Or, you know, a doctoral student falling apart in their fugue. And I'm like, yeah, when I told you to memorize the different voices, might be a good idea. Now's a good time to start, right? So it really will be your friend, right? If you let them get up there and crash and burn once or twice in a friendly environment, it often gives you credibility. Right? So it's not a bad thing. And again, they learn from their memory lapses. I will tell a student that if you get up there and you think you knew it, but then you get up on stage and you fall apart, what have you learned? Right? What have you learned? Okay, that's a weak spot, right? And honestly, what happens if you were performing this Beethoven sonata and you got to measure 8 and you forgot what happened? What's going to happen the next time you get to measure 8 in a performance? Are you going to be nervous? Right? No, I'm worried about it. Okay? Right? And then it's always in the back of your head, oh gosh, this is where I forgot. And that's why going back to the beginning is never a good idea, because you're going to get to measure 8 again.
Right.
It's going to happen.
Been there.
So instead of doing, so I'm trying to teach a student that, okay, what did you learn? Okay, I learned that I don't know measure 8. All right, so you're going to go back today and you're going to make measure 8 the best part of the piece, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to take the weak spot and they're going to make it a strong spot, right? And we all know that where you forgot this week, now I've made it my strong spot. What's going to happen next week? It's going to be a different spot, right? But this whole learning process actually, I think, teaches you not to be so afraid of it. I think a lot of the way people play and have trouble with performance is because of the fear of what might happen, right? And then we play in fear, right? And we're sitting there worried, and then nothing comes out right. So the more you can calm that voice down and calm things down and reassure yourself that you know it, the better you are able to overcome what happens, right? Because something's going to happen. It happens to everybody, right? So thoughts for the big day. So now's where you get to talk about performance anxiety. Right? It's at the very end, right? Meaning that there are things you can do as you get ready for a performance that will help you, and there are things that you can do as you get ready for a performance that are going to hurt you, right? One of the first things I tell my students is your job is to warm up. Do not sit down and play your entire program from memory from beginning to end. There is a difference in warming up. What our goal is to get up on stage with the hands warm, ready to play. We feel relaxed. We feel like everything's are responding. We want to be warmed up. Better approaches are scales, technical exercises, other repertoire, right? Things that are going to get you going and get you relaxed and feeling comfortable with the keyboard. Most of our students sit down and play through their piece over and over and over and over and over again by memory and then walk on stage, right? And that's my next thought. I'm going to tell them to go slow. I'm not saying don't play the piece. I'm going to say play your piece at half the tempo, thoughtfully, listening, concentrating on what you want it to sound like rather than just frantically playing through it. So I encourage students to play the piece at a very slow tempo.